Eyes on me. Claire Whitmore's voice sliced through the harbor with the kind of authority that made conversation stop mid-sentence and expensive coffee cups freeze halfway to waiting lips. Every dockhand, executive, captain, and mechanic turned toward the gleaming 78-foot yacht resting against the polished marina, its pearl-white hull shimmering beneath the Florida sun like a floating palace. The $20 million vessel had become the most embarrassing problem her company had ever faced. 5 certified marine technicians had spent the last 2 days crawling through its engine room. 2 manufacturer specialists had flown in from Seattle that morning. A senior engineer from Miami had walked away shaking his head less than 10 minutes earlier. The engine still refused to synchronize, and every failed attempt pushed back a multi-million-dollar client demonstration scheduled for sunset. Claire stood on the teak deck in a tailored ivory blazer, dark sunglasses resting lightly against her golden hair, her calm expression hiding the pressure threatening to unravel weeks of negotiations. Then her eyes settled on a man quietly tightening a loose railing several slips away. His faded blue maintenance shirt carried the embroidered name Nathan Mercer. His toolbox was older than some of the luxury cars parked outside the marina. His boots showed years of honest work, and a silver wedding band no longer occupied the pale mark on his left hand. "You," Claire called sharply, pointing toward him. "Stop what you're doing and get over here." Nathan looked up without hurry. He closed his toolbox carefully before walking across the dock with measured steps that somehow ignored the curious stares gathering around him. Trevor Kane, the marina operations manager, smirked as Nathan approached. Perfect timing, Trevor laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Maybe our maintenance guy can solve what the experts couldn't." A ripple of restrained laughter spread through the crowd. Claire folded her arms. "Everyone else has failed. Either you fix my yacht, or at least prove why nobody can." Nathan glanced toward the yacht without reacting to the sarcasm. Surrounding him. His gray-blue eyes moved slowly from the propellers resting beneath the waterline to the exhaust outlets, then upward toward the bridge where several expensive navigation displays remained illuminated. He never rushed. He never defended himself. He simply observed. That silence irritated Trevor even more. "Well?" Trevor asked. "Cat got your tongue?" Nathan finally spoke, his voice calm enough that people instinctively leaned closer to hear. "May I ask one question before anyone starts the engines again?" Claire removed her sunglasses. "One question." Nathan looked directly at her, respectful but completely unshaken. "Who authorized replacing the portside synchronization module before checking the cooling bypass circuit?" For the first time all afternoon, nobody answered. Trevor's smile faded. One technician frowned. Another slowly lowered the diagnostic tablet in his hands. Claire blinked once, surprised less by the question itself than by the confidence behind it. Nathan had not opened a single access panel. He had not connected a computer. He had barely touched the yacht. Yet somehow he had asked the one question that none of the certified specialists had thought to ask, and as the warm ocean breeze drifted across the silent marina, something invisible shifted in the air. The crowd was no longer looking at a maintenance worker. They were looking at a mystery. If this story has you hooked, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel. Also, are you Team CEO or Team Single Dad? Let me know in the comments. Now, back to the story. Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the open engine hatch and rested one hand lightly against the polished stainless steel railing, listening instead of looking. The marina remained strangely quiet as the afternoon breeze carried the scent of saltwater and fresh diesel across the docks. Claire watched him with growing impatience. She had built an entire business on fast decisions, measurable results, and people who either delivered or disappeared. This man did neither. He simply stood there as though the yacht itself was speaking to him. Trevor folded his arms with an exaggerated sigh. "He is buying time," he muttered loudly enough for several employees to hear. That is what people do when they have no idea what they are looking at. Nathan ignored the remark completely. He slowly walked toward the stern, glanced beneath the swim platform, then looked up at the exhaust outlets again. His eyes narrowed for only a moment before he turned back toward the engine room entrance. Would someone start the starboard engine only, he asked calmly. Leave the port engine completely off. One technician hesitated before looking toward Claire. She gave a reluctant nod. Seconds later the engine rumbled to life, its deep tone echoing softly across the calm water. Nathan closed his eyes. He was not inspecting gauges. He was listening. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. Then he quietly lifted one finger. Shut it down. The engine fell silent again. Nathan crouched beside a storage compartment and gently touched the metal deck with the back of his hand. Interesting, he whispered almost to himself. Claire stepped closer. Did you find something? Nathan looked up. I found something that should not be happening. Trevor laughed again. That is not exactly helpful. Nathan stood and brushed a trace of dust from his hands. The vibration pattern is wrong. One of the certified technicians frowned. You cannot determine that without the diagnostic software. Nathan smiled politely. Sometimes software confirms what experience already knows. The technician opened his mouth to argue but stopped. Nathan continued walking slowly around the yacht, tracing invisible lines with his eyes as though following a map no one else could see. Claire noticed something unusual. He never appeared nervous. He never tried to impress anyone. He never glanced toward the growing audience surrounding the dock. It was almost as if public opinion had stopped mattering to him years ago. As she watched him, another image unexpectedly entered her mind. Early that morning she had seen the same man arriving before sunrise with a little girl carrying a purple backpack almost as large as she was. The child had wrapped both arms around him before climbing into a school shuttle waiting. Outside the marina. Nathan had knelt beside her, brushed a loose strand of blonde hair away from her face, and smiled with a warmth completely different from the quiet expression he wore now. Claire remembered the girl waving through the window until the shuttle disappeared around the corner, and Nathan standing there for another moment before picking up his worn toolbox and beginning another ordinary workday. It had seemed like such an ordinary scene that she had forgotten it within minutes. Now she wondered how many mornings had looked exactly the same. Nathan finally stopped beside the open engine compartment once more. I need one flashlight, a 1/4-inch socket wrench, and a clean shop towel, he said. Trevor rolled his eyes. That is all. Nathan nodded. That is all I need for now. Around the dock, several technicians exchanged uncertain glances. None of them understood why a maintenance worker who had not connected a single computer seemed more interested in listening, watching, and remembering than replacing expensive parts. Yet despite themselves, they found they were no longer laughing. Nathan accepted the flashlight without another word. He switched it on only once, sweeping the narrow beam across the engine compartment before switching it off again. The movement puzzled everyone watching. Most technicians relied on digital scanners, pressure sensors, and diagnostic software. Nathan relied first on memory. He leaned carefully into the engine room, resting one hand against the bulkhead as though feeling the heartbeat of the vessel itself. The polished machinery reflected ribbons of afternoon sunlight through the open hatch while the faint smell of warm oil lingered in the still air. Claire remained only a few feet away, watching every movement with growing curiosity. Trevor, however, had already decided the outcome. If staring could repair engines, he joked, we would all be experts. A few nervous chuckles echoed across the dock, but they faded quickly when Nathan spoke again. Has anyone inspected the seawater bypass valve manually? One technician answered almost immediately. The computer reported normal flow. Nathan looked at him with quiet respect. That was not my question. The technician hesitated. No, Nathan nodded gently, never sounding critical. Computers measure what they are told to measure. Machinery tells a different story. He reached toward a narrow section behind the port engine where several heavy cooling lines disappeared beneath protective shielding. The space was too tight for most hands, yet Nathan carefully guided the small flashlight into the opening before removing it again. He did not force anything. He simply observed. Claire noticed that every movement seemed deliberate, almost practiced, as though he had worked inside spaces even tighter than this one many times before. Nathan extended his hand. "The shop towel, please." One of the younger mechanics handed it to him. Nathan folded it into a neat square before sliding it beneath a narrow connection that almost nobody else had noticed. A single drop of cloudy moisture landed on the white cloth. He smiled faintly. "There you are." Trevor frowned. "A little condensation does not explain 2 days of failure." Nathan stood upright. "No. But it explains where the real problem begins." Claire crossed her arms again, although this time her expression carried more interest than skepticism. "Explain." Nathan remained calm. "Someone replaced an expensive synchronization module because the symptoms pointed there. The actual fault appears to be upstream. Cooling flow has been restricted long enough to create inconsistent thermal expansion. Every electronic adjustment afterward only chased the wrong problem." Silence settled over the dock. One senior technician quietly reviewed the maintenance records on his tablet. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "The synchronization module was replaced yesterday morning," he admitted. Nathan nodded once. "Before anyone physically inspected the bypass assembly." Another pause followed. The technician looked back at the digital log, then toward Nathan. "That is correct." Trevor shifted uneasily. "You are making assumptions." Nathan smiled politely. "Then let us remove 4 bolts and see whether I am wrong." Claire studied his face carefully. There was no pride in his voice, no desire to embarrass anyone. He sounded like a teacher inviting a class to solve a puzzle together. That unsettled her more than confidence ever could. She gave a slow nod. "Open it." The younger mechanics exchanged uncertain glances before reaching for their tools. As the protective cover came free inch by inch, every eye focused on the narrow cooling passage hidden beneath it. One mechanic suddenly stopped turning his wrench. His eyes widened. He looked first at the exposed assembly, then at Nathan, and finally back toward Claire. "Ma'am," he said quietly, almost unable to believe what he was seeing, "I think he knew exactly where to look before any of us even touched it." The final bolts came free with a soft metallic click, and the protective cover slid aside just enough for the mechanics to peer inside. A thin layer of crystallized mineral buildup clung to the narrow cooling bypass passage, almost invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. One of the younger technicians leaned closer, his flashlight trembling slightly. "That restriction is cutting the cooling flow," he murmured. "The sensors never flagged it." Nathan nodded. "Because the blockage developed gradually. The system learned to compensate until it could not anymore." The dock fell quiet again. The gentle slap of waves against the hull replaced the laughter that had filled the marina only minutes earlier. Claire stepped closer, kneeling beside the open compartment without concern for the expensive fabric of her blazer. "Can it be repaired today?" she asked. Nathan considered the question for a moment before answering. "Yes. But replacing parts will not solve it. The cooling circuit has to be cleaned completely, then recalibrated in the proper sequence." Trevor shook his head. "That procedure is not even in the manufacturer's service guide." Nathan looked at him calmly. Neither was the problem. Another silence followed. Nobody argued. Nathan reached for the 1/4-inch socket wrench again and carefully loosened another fitting, placing each bolt on the folded shop towel in perfect order instead of scattering them across the deck. One mechanic noticed the pattern immediately. "You always organize them like that?" Nathan smiled faintly. "If every piece returns exactly where it belongs, the machine remembers how it was built." The older technician standing near the engine hatch watched with increasing fascination. Nathan never searched for the next tool. His hands moved with quiet precision, each motion efficient without ever appearing rushed. He did not check a manual. He did not ask for specifications. It was as though the entire propulsion system already existed inside his memory. Claire noticed it too. "How many yachts have you repaired?" she asked. Nathan wiped a small amount of residue from one fitting before answering. "Very few." Trevor immediately seized on the answer. "There it is. I knew it. You barely have experience with vessels like this." Nathan simply continued working. "I did not say I lacked experience with propulsion systems." Trevor opened his mouth to respond but stopped when Nathan carefully held up a small valve assembly. The component appeared ordinary, yet one side carried faint scoring marks that most people would never have noticed. Nathan pointed toward them with the tip of the flashlight. "This valve has been sticking for months. Every electronic adjustment afterward treated the symptom instead of the cause." The senior technician accepted the valve, examined it closely, and slowly exhaled. "He is right," he admitted. "The wear pattern proves it." Claire looked from the damaged component to Nathan with an expression that had completely changed. Her confidence had not disappeared, but it had been replaced by genuine respect. "Can you finish it?" she asked quietly. Nathan met her eyes for the first time since stepping aboard. "I can restore the system. But before we restart these engines, there is something I need to verify." He turned his attention toward the engine room once more, studying a series of pipes running deep beneath the deck. The older technician continued watching him in thoughtful silence. There was something strangely familiar about the way Nathan inspected machinery, the disciplined rhythm of every movement, the habit of solving the entire system before touching a single repair. The technician narrowed his eyes, searching. His memory, feeling certain he had seen that exact method somewhere long before, somewhere far beyond any civilian marina. The older technician remained motionless, his eyes never leaving Nathan's hands. There was a rhythm to every movement that refused to leave his memory. It was disciplined without being rigid, careful without hesitation, the kind of method developed only after years of carrying responsibility where mistakes could never be repeated. Nathan finished flushing the restricted cooling passage, replaced the cleaned valve assembly, and tightened each fastener in the exact reverse order that he had removed them. He paused only once to run his fingertips lightly across one of the cooling lines before stepping back. "Fill the coolant reservoir to the marked level," he said quietly. "Then prime the system for 30 seconds before ignition." One mechanic blinked. "That is not the normal startup sequence." Nathan gave a small nod. "Not after a thermal imbalance." Claire looked toward her engineering team. No one objected. They followed Nathan's instructions exactly as he spoke them. The marina became almost completely silent except for the distant cry of seagulls and the gentle splash of water against the dock. Every employee seemed to understand that something unusual was unfolding. Nathan looked toward the helm. "Start the starboard engine." The ignition switch turned. A deep, confident rumble rolled through the yacht, smoother than before. Several mechanics exchanged hopeful smiles. Nathan listened without moving. His expression remained calm. "Now bring the port engine online." The second engine came alive. For a brief moment both engines settled into a clean synchronized rhythm that echoed across the harbor. Trevor grinned. "There it is. We have got it." A few people started clapping. Claire allowed herself the smallest relieved smile. The impossible problem finally appeared solved. Nathan raised one hand. "Shut them down." The celebration stopped immediately. The engines fell silent once more. Trevor stared in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Nathan answered without raising his voice. "Preventing a second failure." Confused faces surrounded him. Claire stepped closer. "You just fixed it." Nathan looked toward the polished hull reflecting the late afternoon sunlight. I restored balance to the cooling system, but another hidden issue remains. If this yacht leaves the marina now, the engines will operate normally for a short time. Then excessive heat will return under load. Trevor shook his head. That is speculation. Nathan calmly pointed toward the exhaust outlets. No. It is evidence. The older technician suddenly walked to the stern and crouched beside the waterline. He studied the faint discoloration around one outlet for several seconds before slowly standing again. His expression changed completely. He is right, he whispered. There has been uneven heat discharge for a long time. Claire frowned. How could everyone miss that? The technician answered without taking his eyes off Nathan. Because we trusted the computers more than the machine. Nathan picked up the folded shop towel and carefully wiped his hands clean. Mechanical systems always leave clues. They simply do not speak with words. The older technician continued staring at him, his breathing noticeably slower now as old memories surfaced one after another. The precision. The inspection sequence. The habit of solving the entire propulsion network before replacing a single component. He had witnessed that exact engineering philosophy decades earlier during a naval maintenance conference that only a handful of military specialists had attended. He looked at Nathan with growing disbelief, as though trying to recognize someone he had not seen in many years. Then, almost involuntarily, he took one careful step forward and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Forgive me for asking, but did you ever serve with the United States Navy Engineering Command? Nathan remained still for a moment after hearing the question. The breeze lifted the edge of the folded shop towel in his hand while the marina seemed to hold its breath. He looked at the older technician with quiet eyes and answered in the same calm voice he had used all afternoon. I served for many years. That was all he said. No rank. No titles. No attempt to explain. The older technician took another careful step forward. His weathered face slowly filled with recognition. I knew I had seen those inspection methods before, he whispered. Nobody in civilian marine service works through an entire propulsion system that way. We learned that approach from Navy engineering instructors decades ago. Trevor folded his arms again, trying to dismiss the growing tension. Lots of veterans work on boats. That does not make him some kind of legend. Nathan simply returned to the engine compartment and inspected another cooling line without responding. Claire watched him differently now. The confidence she had mistaken for stubbornness suddenly looked more like quiet discipline. The older technician continued speaking, almost to himself. You never chased alarms. You always found the source before touching the symptoms. You inspected sound, vibration, heat, and flow together. That was the standard for mission readiness. Nathan gave a small nod without looking up. Machines usually tell the truth before computers do. Claire stepped closer. You said another problem remains. Show us. Nathan pointed toward a narrow section behind the secondary heat exchanger. There is one support bracket hidden beneath that assembly. It appears secure, but I believe the mounting surface has shifted slightly over time. Under heavier throttle the vibration will increase until cooling efficiency drops again. One mechanic looked doubtful. We cannot even see that bracket. Nathan smiled faintly. Exactly. The mechanic carefully reached into the confined space with a small inspection mirror. After several seconds he stopped moving altogether. There is a gap, he said quietly. Less than 1/8 of an inch, but it is there. Another technician leaned in beside him. That should not be possible. Nathan answered gently. Metal remembers stress. It moves a little at a time. Claire looked from the hidden bracket to Nathan with growing disbelief. You predicted that without seeing it. Nathan shrugged almost apologetically. I have seen similar failures before. The older technician's expression changed once again. He studied Nathan's face more carefully now. searching beyond the faded maintenance shirt and worn work boots. Then his eyes settled on a small embroidered name above the shirt pocket. Mercer. The name stirred another memory buried beneath years of retirement. Naval engineering conferences. Fleet readiness reports. Technical briefings attended by only a handful of senior officers. His breathing slowed as the pieces finally connected. Mercer, he repeated softly. Nathan Mercer. Nathan looked up. Their eyes met for only a second. That was enough. The older technician straightened instinctively, not because anyone ordered him to, but because long-forgotten habits returned on their own. Respect replaced curiosity. He lowered his voice almost to a whisper. Are you the engineering officer who led emergency propulsion recovery for Atlantic Fleet maintenance operations? Around them, every conversation stopped. Claire looked from one man to the other, unable to understand why a simple maintenance worker had suddenly become the center of such profound respect. Nathan did not answer immediately. Instead, he quietly picked up his wrench, tightened the hidden support bracket exactly 1/4 turn, and only then looked back at the older technician with a modest smile that revealed nothing except years of practiced humility. Nathan lowered his eyes for a brief moment before answering. Yes, he said simply. I served as an engineering officer. That was a long time ago. The older technician let out a slow breath that sounded almost like disbelief. Long ago or not, I remember the reports. We studied your propulsion recovery procedures during continuing certification classes. Your recommendations became required reading for marine engineering instructors. Trevor laughed uneasily. You expect us to believe our maintenance worker wrote military procedures? The older technician turned toward him with quiet certainty. No. I expect you to believe that I recognize excellence when I see it. Claire remained silent. She had spent years negotiating billion-dollar contracts, reading boardrooms, and judging character within seconds. Yet she realized she had completely misjudged the quiet man standing in front of her. Nathan showed no pride. He offered no correction, no dramatic speech, and no attempt to impress anyone. He simply picked up the inspection mirror one final time and checked the repaired bracket before setting every borrowed tool back exactly where it belonged. Please start both engines again, he said. One mechanic climbed to the helm. The first engine came alive with a steady, confident rumble. Seconds later the second engine joined it. This time the sound was different. There was no uneven vibration traveling through the deck. No faint hesitation. No subtle shudder hiding beneath the synchronized rhythm. The yacht seemed to breathe with effortless balance. Nathan listened quietly for nearly half a minute before giving a gentle nod. Increase the throttle to 1500 revolutions per minute. The engines responded smoothly. The water behind the stern rippled evenly as twin streams flowed with identical pressure. Every technician watched the gauges. Every reading remained stable. Claire folded her arms, but not out of authority anymore. She was trying to understand the man who had solved in less than an hour what specialists had failed to repair in 2 days. The older technician smiled faintly. He never repaired machinery one component at a time, he said softly. He always restored the entire system. Trevor stared at the instrument panel, searching for some flaw that would prove Nathan wrong. None appeared. After another minute Nathan quietly raised his hand. That is enough. The engines returned to idle before shutting down with perfect symmetry. Silence settled across the marina once again, but this silence carried something entirely different. It was no longer doubt. It was respect. Claire looked directly at Nathan. Why are you working here? She asked. Someone with your experience could have accepted almost any engineering position in the country. Nathan smiled gently, though there was sadness hidden behind the warmth. Some jobs pay more. Some jobs let you be home before your daughter finishes school. No one spoke. The answer landed more heavily than any impressive resume ever could. The older technician slowly removed his cap. I heard stories about an officer who refused promotions because he believed equipment only mattered if it brought every sailor home safely. I never expected to meet him standing on a marina dock carrying a worn toolbox. Nathan shook his head modestly. The ships belonged to the crews. I was only responsible for keeping them ready. Claire lowered her eyes for the first time that afternoon. She remembered the sharp command she had shouted across the dock only hours earlier, the assumptions she had made, and the quiet dignity with which Nathan had answered every insult. Looking back at him now, she realized the most extraordinary thing about the man before her was not that he had once helped keep America's warships mission ready. It was that after everything he had accomplished, he still treated every engine, every co-worker, and every ordinary day with the same steady respect. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but no one left with the same expression they had worn an hour earlier. Conversations that had once carried quiet amusement were now filled with respectful whispers. Several mechanics walked back toward the engine room, studying the repaired system again as though hoping to discover one hidden trick they had somehow overlooked. They found none. Nathan had not relied on tricks. He had relied on patience, discipline, and years of experience that could never be downloaded into a computer. Claire remained standing on the polished deck long after everyone else had finished talking. The warm afternoon sun reflected across the calm harbor, painting ribbons of gold over the gentle waves. She watched Nathan carefully wipe each borrowed tool clean before placing it back inside his old metal toolbox. Even after solving a problem that had protected an important business presentation and saved weeks of costly delays, he behaved as though he had simply completed another ordinary maintenance task. Claire stepped toward him. Nathan. He looked up with the same calm expression. Yes, ma'am. She hesitated. For perhaps the first time in years, words that normally came effortlessly refused to appear. Finally she spoke quietly. I owe you an apology. Nathan did not answer. Immediately. Claire continued. When I called you over this afternoon, I saw a uniform instead of a person. I assumed your position defined your ability. I was wrong. The dock became silent once again. Trevor shifted uncomfortably a few steps away, avoiding everyone's eyes. Nathan offered a small, understanding smile. We all make decisions with the information we have. Claire slowly shook her head. No. I made assumptions without seeking information. She glanced toward the restored yacht resting peacefully beside the dock. You did more than repair an engine today. You protected my company, my employees, and the confidence of clients who trusted us. I cannot pretend that is ordinary work. Nathan closed the lid of his toolbox with a soft click. The yacht deserved to leave this marina safely. That was enough reason. The simplicity of the answer seemed to affect everyone standing nearby. The older technician smiled quietly. That sounds exactly like every story I ever heard about you. Nathan looked almost embarrassed by the attention. Stories usually improve with age. A few gentle laughs replaced the earlier tension, not mocking laughter this time, but warm appreciation. Claire reached into the inside pocket of her blazer and removed a business card. If you would ever consider leading our marine engineering division, the position is yours. Nathan accepted the card politely but did not look at it. Thank you. That is generous. Claire noticed he had not agreed. You are thinking about your daughter. Nathan nodded. She has already lost enough time with one parent. I promised myself she would never lose time with the other because of a title. Claire lowered her eyes, understanding far more than he had actually said. She remembered the little girl waving from the school shuttle that morning, completely certain her father would be there waiting when the school day ended. Suddenly every career decision Nathan had made became perfectly clear. Success had never been measured by rank, salary, or recognition. It had been measured by promises kept. As the late afternoon breeze carried the scent of the ocean across the quiet marina, Claire realized that the greatest lesson she had learned that day had nothing to do with engines. True leadership was not announced by status. It revealed itself through humility, quiet competence, and the willingness to serve without asking for applause. The sun had begun its slow descent beyond the marina, turning the water into a sheet of gold that shimmered beneath the quiet evening sky. The restored yacht rested peacefully against the dock, its engines now silent not because they had failed, but because there was nothing left to prove. One by one the employees gathered their tools and headed home, yet many paused before leaving to offer Nathan a simple nod or a quiet thank you. Respect had replaced curiosity. The older technician walked over and extended his hand. Nathan accepted it with the same humility he had shown all day. You reminded all of us why engineering is more than machinery, the older man said. It is responsibility. Nathan smiled gently. The people depending on the machine always matter more than the machine itself. Those words lingered in the cool ocean air long after the conversation ended. Claire stood alone on the deck for another moment before stepping down onto the dock. Her high heels clicked softly against the weathered wood until she reached Nathan just as he lifted his old toolbox. Would you allow me to drive you home? She asked. Nathan shook his head politely. Thank you, but someone else is already waiting for me. Almost on cue, a familiar yellow school shuttle turned into the marina parking lot. The door folded open, and Lily Mercer stepped out with her purple backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The moment she spotted her father, her face lit up with the kind of joy that could never be purchased. She hurried across the sidewalk, and Nathan knelt to greet her with the same warm smile Claire had remembered from that morning. How was school? He asked. Great, Lily answered. Did you fix the big boat? Nathan chuckled softly. It was a team effort. Lily looked up at the enormous yacht with wide eyes before turning toward Claire. My dad always says every problem has an answer if people are patient enough to listen. Claire felt her throat tighten. She looked back at Nathan and realized that the greatest lesson of the day had come not from an engineering manual or a business meeting, but from the quiet example of a father who lived his values every single day. She bent slightly to meet Lily's eyes. Your father helped a lot of people today. Lily smiled proudly. He does that a lot. Nathan gently placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Ready to go home? Can we stop for ice cream? She asked hopefully. He laughed. I think we can do that. They began walking toward the parking lot together, father and daughter moving side by side as the evening breeze carried the scent of saltwater through the harbor. Halfway across the lot, Nathan paused and looked back only once. Claire was still standing beside the yacht, watching them leave. She raised one hand in a quiet wave. Nathan returned the gesture with a grateful smile before continuing toward the old pickup truck waiting beneath the fading light. Claire remained there until the truck disappeared beyond the marina entrance. The harbor had grown peaceful again, but something inside her had changed forever. She had started the day believing titles created greatness. She ended it understanding that true greatness often wears ordinary clothes, keeps humble promises, and chooses family over recognition. Long after the last ripple settled against the dock, one truth remained as steady as the tide itself: dignity never needs to announce its presence, because genuine character has a way of leaving every heart quieter than it found it. Thanks for spending your time with us today. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. And I'm curious, how old are you, and did this story feel relatable to you? Let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.